The bell tolled, 10 and 2, the 12th hour, the last hour, longest of them all. The dragging of chains made for a dreadful drum march, as Gregory struggled forward through the darkened stone corridors. The sleek metal of cell bars shone with the sepia light of sparsely placed torches. The flickering lights cast shadows to and fro, like tendrils of sentient darkness, reaching out to pull him into the madness that was without sight. His fate was sealed, but he would not suffer it alone. At his side another captive, shawled and shackled like himself, both tethered in chains to a single jailer. Their progress was constant, a slow advance further into the heart of the labyrinthine network of cells. The torches gave off paltry light, leaving much of the cells dark as they passed, and lending license to the horrors that the mind invents in the inky depths of the unexplored. In some, white eyes shone back, dripping with the expressions that their shaded faces could not convey: terror, madness, animal-like abandon. Gregory could hear scraping and shambling from the dark, cackles of laughter and growls of pain and hopelessness. If they traveled any further, Gregory was certain they would be crossing into the very rings of the underworld. It could have been that notion or the fear, but he could swear it was getting hotter. The final unbarred door came into view around the corner of a group of cells. Entering it was like walking into a tomb. It was a single slab of concrete the whole way around, the hollow left of some otherworldly monster, the cradle from whence evil hatched upon the world. There were no windows, no decorations, only a single light suspended from the tall ceiling over a wooden chair. The chair was really just a simple pile of wood and angles that forced its occupier into a sitting position. It reeked of grim deeds. The warden pulled Gregory closer, compelling him to sit before abandoning him and the other prisoner to the purposes of the room. A man and a woman, the only other occupants of the cell, made quiet remarks to themselves as they examined their assignment. Scouring him with their eyes, the two busily catalogued his flaws and failings and scratches on their clipboards. Idly, Gregory wondered if he was properly dressed for the occasion. Finally, one of the interrogators spoke. It was the woman, thin and curvaceous, with a sternness that was only magnified with age. She said low and throaty, "How are you?" The question made Gregory pause. Could this be a trick? What would they care, he thought? Could they possibly have dragged him all the way down to this chamber of who knows what, only to ask him how he was or about the weather? The lighting was still dim as he looked around. The smooth concrete changed to stucco, the bars turned into vertical shades, and the smell of death had become the aroma of garlic and bay leaves, a bouquet of Italian spices. Gustav and Lorraine Heinz stared at him across a hardwood table, waiting impatiently for his answer. Heather was seated at the chair beside him. I'm fine, I guess," Gregory stuttered out. The night was already off to a great start. Picking up the menu, Gregory was thrilled to erect a wall between himself and them. The quiet cold of his father's demeanor was awful, and the patronizing tone of his mother's inquiries were worse. How had he managed to survive living with them all these years, Gregory thought to himself. The restaurant was lively for a Monday evening. Families and parties ate and drank. Colleagues argued and laughed at the trivial anecdotes of another weekend past. Some sipped at glasses of cola or beer, others stabbed at mountainous plates with forks and knives, displaying all the decorum of cavemen. After they had perused the menus and decided on what to order, Gregory had to give up his last line of laminated defense to the waiter and allow the bloodletting of information to run its course. "So how are you liking your classes?" Lorraine asked, her eyes aflame with interest and measuring. "Did you take my suggestion and sign up for the hospitality management course? I know it sounds somewhat dry, but think of how it will look on a resume." Gregory and Heather exchanged puzzled looks before Gregory responded, "Mom, I haven't signed up for any classes yet." Lorraine's eyes narrowed slightly. The chatter of the restaurant patrons waned. Unconsciously, the focal point of the entire dining universe had shifted to their table. The ambient conversations had become near muted breaths in anticipation of the main act. Well, you would better hurry up, Gregory. The admissions office might not be able to add you to the class now. You need to be more timely about these things. Gus was adjusting the cream to sugar ratio of his coffee, but managed to shoot a concerted look of reprimand at Gregory. Anyhow, she continued, I thought when you decided to study cooking it was a silly waste of time. But I've done some reading, and you really could make good money. A 5-star chef, or a private cook for the Hollywood elite. A career worthy of pursuing. Taking a long sip of her coffee, the spotlight of her gaze pointed at him over the porcelain rim. Lowering the cup, she added, Granted, you pursue it, and don't miss any more deadlines. Mom, I was thinking, he began, but as soon as Gregory spoke, the thoughts became intangible, like he was grabbing at smoke that swirled around the unfocused tips of his fingers. They were there, in his head, but he simply could not grasp them to say. Yes, she coaxed, her eyes sharp with anticipation of the words to come. I don't think I'm going to be signing up for classes right now, Gregory managed. The corners of Lorraine's mouth curled under, like anchors pulling the rest of her features down. Her scowl exposed what makeup and science tried to hide. Track marks around her eyes, the jowls that hung with the weight of time, lined and tired inelastic skin. Her face became a premonition of age. I had thought we had came to an understanding the last time we spoke, she said, polite and composed, despite her obvious displeasure. I thought you had come to see reason. The room was dimming. The racket of the other patrons faded out as Gregory's world spun backwards, shrinking till he felt like he was 12 years old again. His vexed mother, his stonewalling father, preparing to correct him, put him back on their ever straight and narrowing path. A warmth brushed his palm as Gregory felt the presence of another hand clasping his own. Heather's skin was soft but reassuring. I'm not ready to go back right now. Why not? She implored. You're 24 years old, Gregory. It's about time you started taking a real effort in the direction your life is heading. I know that, he replied, his momentary bravery usurped by a piercing look from his father. I know I'm not getting any younger. I just don't know if cooking is the way that I want to go. His mother let out an exasperated sigh, a rarity in her always professional manner. Her demeanor had forever been that of a 25-year-long office manager. Impeccable etiquette, clockwork-like punctuality, condescending micromanaging, though the job in itself was a vague title of little or no actual purpose. His father was much the same case. Gus had driven for the same over-the-road trucking outfit for 30 years, and in those 3 decades never once left the state. It had been a lackluster job that he had since left for a more lackluster retirement. Both of them had had jobs that Gregory could see himself performing endlessly, day in, day out, earning just enough pay for the bills and to enjoy an uninspiring, comfortable lifestyle. Then what do you want to do, Gregory? Everything, he wanted to say. Fly planes, fight dragons, lead revolutions, save little old ladies, cure fatally wounded swimsuit models. He wanted to do everything. There really wasn't a career path that he had ever found that included all of it. Gregory had always feared that to settle on one meant he would have to give up his dreams of all the rest. I don't know, he said quietly. And you support this indecision? Lorraine swiveled her face lasers on Heather. Heather's hand twitched slightly at the sudden change from being ignored to being a wanted consultant, though her voice was deceptively calm. I support Gregory in what he wants, even if he doesn't quite know what that is yet. After a brief pause, she added, So, yes, I do support this. I see. Lorraine's eyes measured Heather, polite and calculating, before replying. I just hope you two are being careful for the time being. I wouldn't want my grandchildren to be born yet into such squalor. Heather's face smoldered with barely masked outrage. The food arrived before anything more could be said. A momentary ceasefire. The tablecloth no redder for the effort. No, Jeremy whispered to Anna. I loved you first. The tears that swelled in Anna's eyes erupted with all the emotion and authenticity of a leaky faucet. The camera panned in on Anna's mouth as she spoke, an implication that her next line would be the key to the mysteries of the universe, or some discovery equally as vital. I guess this means I'm the lucky one, she whispered. Gregory wanted to gag as the actors leapt into each other's mouths to the crescendo of flutes and violins. The sun started to set behind the couple, symbolism of the passage of time around their ageless love. The screen faded to black as the credits began to roll. Gregory raised his arm in a deep yawn. Heather stirred a bit, her little body draped like a sleepy blanket across his lap. She didn't seem angry at him anymore, though he couldn't see if the fire still burned in those eyes that had been there on the ride home. Dinner had been a mess. After his mother had retired from dissecting everything from his table manners to his resume content, the subject turned to Gregory's younger brother, Charlie. Lorraine went on to list his every accomplishment as if any second he was going to walk into the dining hall and accept some prestigious award. Graduated with honors, made the dean's list, swamped with calls from major companies wanting him to work for them. Funny, Charlie's major changed so often, Gregory couldn't recall what degree he was even getting. But according to their mother, he was going somewhere. Gregory loved his brother. They were both survivors, POWs of a Heinz childhood. He didn't carry any ill will towards Charlie's success, but at the same time, Gregory hated that he always sounded like he was doing so much better. The car ride home replayed over in his mind. The hurt had stood out in her eyes just beneath the anger. Why don't you stand up for yourself? She moved, murmuring quietly in her half-sleep, wrapping her arms around Gregory's waistline. He reached down and gently stroked her scalp through tides of yellow gold hair. Did Gaston ever find his true love? She mumbled. Gregory chuckled, thinking of the ridiculously scripted character. That overused bad boy who loved himself more than he can ever love a woman. No, Gregory replied. He never walked past a mirror. Heather made a scoffing sound. Don't make fun of my movie, she scolded sleepily. What was he doing with his life? Gregory questioned. Maybe his mother had a point. He couldn't concede to agreeing with her completely, but maybe he did need to pick a direction and just start walking. Who knew? Maybe in time he would learn to enjoy the career choices he had made. Gregory's thoughts took him back to the days of his father getting home after long, miserable hours on the road, how he looked and how he acted. He had always been a man of little expression, but in those days, he was much sharper when it came to his temper. Noticing the hour on the clock, Gregory decided it was past time to get Heather into bed. Her dead weight was a reassuring comfort on his troubled conscience, but this would not do for her getting a good night's sleep. Resolving not to wake her, Gregory slipped an arm under her knee, using the other to wrap around her shoulder. Trying to be silent and graceful, Gregory struggled to his feet. Cradling Heather in his arms, he could feel the burn in his muscles and the ache of sustaining her weight throughout his body. Halfway across the small living room, Gregory's arms buckled, sending Heather falling to the carpet floor in a sprawl of limbs. What the fuck? She growled, looking around, pained and confused. Her face scrunched into a glare as Gregory tried to help her. Fighting off his attempts, she crawled to the coffee table and hoisted herself with the corner. After shakily getting to her feet, Heather stumbled towards the bedroom door. You're an asshole, she spat as the door slammed shut behind her. Gregory still stood there, palms out, feeling the spasming tingle from his overworked muscles, and listening to wads of clothes hitting the inside of the door. Even when he tried to be valiant or romantic, he always figured out a way to screw it up. Silence stretched for a few moments. but Gregory waited until he heard the click of the light switch before moving to swap out the movies. Slouching down into the couch again, Gregory adjusted the volume so he wouldn't be disturbing Heather anymore. The blue screen lit the room like an aquarium before fading again to black. The opening credits rolled across a beautiful oceanic sunrise. Gregory let out a breath of anticipation he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Twin jet planes roared quietly past the screen, leaving the title of the movie in their smoky wake, Wings of Courage. The apartment evaporated around him. The kitchen nook was gone, along with the doors to the master bedroom and the bathroom. The walls faded into the sky, first becoming transparent, then ceasing to exist altogether. He gripped the pommel, but with less command than he had earlier. The adrenaline was already wearing off, and his muscles resumed their song of cries. His whole body was now a swirling eddy of exhaustion. The Cicero was there, less than 3 miles away, through the smudged cockpit windows. He had made it through the storm. "How many did we lose?" Gregory called over the two-way reluctantly. 8, the other pilot replied. Only 4 planes were left from the original 12 of his rescue entourage. "May they rest well beneath the ocean's embrace," the pilot called over. Gregory bowed his head in reverence, fighting the sudden urge to black out. 8 more lives to pay the price for millions. He would happily make that trade again, giving up his own, if necessary, to make sure that this antidote had arrived safely. But the dead still deserved their moment of solemnity. "Let's get you home, pilot," another voice echoed through Gregory's distant attention. "You get them to put that cure to work." A bout of hacking and coughing interrupted the link. "And have them mix me a shot while you're at it. Hell, make it a double." The Cicero was getting larger as the tiny plane made its descent. The scratchy symbols on Gregory's HUD spasmed with alarm as the wheels touched ground. The engine started to sputter, even as the plane hooked the cable and ground to a halt. Out of gas. Gregory laughed to himself. "No way I'm pushing this heap to the pump," Gregory said to no one in particular. The flight deck bustled as his aircraft was taxied aside to make way for the other incoming jets. The hatch slid back smoothly as Gregory took a free breath of the ocean-flavored air. The near twilight sky was unspoiled by smoke or pollution. A waning sun reached down to the water, creating a reflection like lovers parted by glass. "That's enough, smelling flowers," Gregory murmured to himself as he swung his leg over the side of the cockpit. He still had a job to complete. No sooner had he made it down the thin metal ladder and his boots touched the runway, Gregory was assailed by what looked like a brittle ghost in a heavy winter coat. The darkness around her eyes told of hard years lived despite the youngness of her features, and the frail texture of her skin resembled that of a paper doll. A little under 36 hours, and she looked closer to death than the Reaper himself. "My love," she rasped, the gentle, effortless cadence of her voice replaced with a sandpaper discomfort. Wrapping his tired arms around her carefully, for fear of breaking her, Gregory could feel the labored breaths. She was still beautiful, but the fiery strength in her was lost to the virus. He said a silent prayer. The cure would not be too late. Letting go for a moment, Gregory reached up the ladder and retrieved the package from its cradle in the jet. Pandora's box. The last of the spirits released upon the world, Hope, lay lamely at the bottom. A small procession had stopped around 20 feet from the plane, clearly giving Gregory a moment alone. With his notice, the group moved closer until they formed a small shell around him. A thin man approached, saluted before proffering his hand to Gregory. In it, Gregory placed the package. The man's mustache wiggled as he weighed the box, turning it over like an impatient child does a gift, hours before he can open it. Satisfied that the box was indeed capable of saving the world, he tucked it under his arm, saluted again, and raced off in the direction of the below-deck entrance. Gregory turned to the remaining 3. A general, judging by his stars, was an average-sized man with the presence of a giant. The virus was evident in the tightness of his normally wrinkled flesh and the hollowness of his eyes. However, his movements showed little sign of weakness. He saluted, and his companions mimed. Gregory returned the greeting, still keeping an arm protectively around her densely coated waist. The general cleared his throat before speaking. "You son of a bitch, you did it," he croaked. The corners of his mouth turned up into a big smile, along with the thinness of his skin made his head look like that of a grinning skull. "At ease, son," he said. Gregory's body couldn't ease up any more without collapsing, so he simply smiled back in reply. "Words can't express the gratitude that this old man, this crew, hell, this nation has for you. You're a hero, son. A goddamned hero." The smile widened, as if that seemed possible, before the general added, "I just might get to see my grandkids again." "Sir, it was an honor to have the opportunity to prove myself, but in all honesty, I only did it for her." Gregory motioned with his hand, rubbing the soft red of her hair against his cheek. "The rest was just a bonus, sir." "Even so," the general continued, "we are all in your debt, soldier." "Permission to take my girl below and get her cured, sir," Gregory requested. "Granted," came the reply. "And you get yourself looked at too, boy," he added. "Won't be any good to her, you wind up getting yourself dead too. Dismissed." With that said, the party started to disperse. One of the officers turned to speak with the general. Gregory reached down and scooped her up into his arms, her small face nuzzled between the thick of red hair and the warmth of his chest. He tenderly carried her off the flight deck and in the direction of the medic ward to the crescendo of violins, trumpets, and brass.